Gurv Margos, Richard. Tá fáilte rih gach daoine anseo, Mudgeon and you, and today we're going to be talking about, what are we talking about? Fistrock Fairness inspections. Somebody told me that's that. Richard has introduced me. We, in the National Building Control Office, our role is to provide overall support and direction for all the 31 building control authorities, the sector in general, to provide for compliant buildings in Ireland, compliance with the requirements of Part A to M of the building regulations, safe, healthy buildings that will last us for our lifetimes and into the next generation without having to undergo serious remediation. And that's a very important thing. And that also contributes to what we do to mitigate against the negative effects of climate change. Build once, build it right. Today, as I said, we're talking about inspections. And what we do as building control officers in the 31 building control authorities and designers, builders, assigned certifiers, we contribute significantly to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So we're not just providing inanimate structures, buildings, we're providing for the health, safety, welfare of citizens, clean water, good quality housing, economic development, enabling economic development in every local authority. So, as I've said, and I can't help repeating it, promoting health, safety and welfare of people in or about buildings. And you see, I've people highlighted. It's about people in or about buildings, conservation of fuel and energy for people, and then access for people with disabilities. So it's health and safety of people is what we're talking about. 90% of us spend 90% of our lives indoors. So we do need a healthy environment with good quality air, light, thermal comfort, water. So we need to remember that. We're not just providing a bit of shelter from the rain anymore. We're providing places for people to live. We promote the regulatory compliance. We're an enabler of economic development, and we need confidence in the building industry for people. Good quality built environment, fit for purpose for people. Consumer protection. Why consumer protection? Because the consumers are people. And we need to think that we cannot deal with people and their buildings and houses separately. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What for? How long? Sustainable development. We haven't built the earth. We're here to provide a future for our children, as well as a reasonable life for ourselves. So the building regulations, building legislative framework, the majority of us know about this. If you don't know it, that's it there. We have the Parent Act, the Building Control Act, provides for building control regulations. They're the controls to demonstrate how you comply with the requirements of the building regulations. Building control officers also have functions under the European Union construction products regulations, for which we are market surveillance authorities, and under the European Union energy performance in buildings regulations, for which we must ensure that every building before it's opened, occupied or used has a BER which is compliant with the requirements. So energy, health, safety, welfare, that's what that's about. Today we're talking about inspections, and the building control officers are given significant powers of inspections as authorised officers under Section 11 of the Building Control Act. An authorised officer can enter a building at all reasonable times to inspect any building or plans following its completion, 5 years after completion of the building, during its construction, or during the installation of any services, fittings or equipment. And services, fittings or equipment come under Part L, conservation of fuel and energy, Part H, drainage and wastewater treatment systems, Part G, every time you replace a cistern, and Part J, your flues and chimneys. So they can inspect material change. Powers, they must be required to be informed by the owner or the occupier the purpose of the building. What are you using this building for? If it's meant to be built for one family, why have you got 20 people living in it made up of 3 families? require the owner to, or occupier, and that's owner or occupier, to provide plans, documents and information necessary to establish if the building regulations are being complied with, and be permitted to take samples of materials necessary to establish. So we can request information, request plans, documents, the use of the building, and take samples. We need to remember that any person who refuses to allow an authorised person to enter, or obstructs an authorised person, or gives false or misleading information to an authorised person, is guilty of an offence and can be prosecuted for that. No more than you would give false or misleading information to the revenue commissioners. You should not give false or misleading information to your building control. It's the same penalty, the same offence. It's a very serious offence, and people need to remember that. Building control officers have power of entry, and if they refuse entry, they can get a district court warrant and enter the premises. Building control officers' regulations, and in most sensible people, stay out of Garda stations and any buildings like that, and prisons, so we don't inspect those. How do you demonstrate compliance? Why are we out inspecting? We demonstrate compliance by our control tools. Our control tools are our notices to commence, where we have demonstrate how we're going to comply with the requirements of the building regulations through plans, specifications, particulars, online assessment. We apply for fire safety certificates, disability access certificates, and demonstrate how we're going to comply with Part B, fire safety, or Part M, access and use. The certificates of compliance before construction include the design certifiers, science certifier certificates, and then certificate of compliance on completion. You have ancillary certificates, inspections, plans. They're all the different controls to demonstrate how you comply with the relevant requirements of the building regulations. Compliance, methods of compliance also include acceptable construction details, European standards, compliance with them, Agrément certificates, design calculations, test, similar construction. So all of these things are methods to demonstrate compliance. And our further speakers will be speaking a little more in depth on those. Construction products regulations is a very important part of the construction process, that every product must have a CE mark, a declaration of performance, and show the essential characteristics. So all of these things are very important. Who's responsible for the compliance is the next thing. Most building owners, and in particular building owners that are owners of one-off dwellings, they need to know that they're absolutely responsible for compliance with the full requirements of the building regulations. And if anything happens, they are the responsible persons. The design certifier and the designer is responsible for compliance, and they must produce a compliant design for a building. They can't say, well, I was only just told to design the plans and I allowed them to build off of those. No, you didn't. No, you must, if you design a building, you must design for compliance with the building regulations if they are construction drawings. And planning drawings and construction drawings are different. The builder is responsible for building in compliance with the building regulations. And it is not an answer to a question, demonstrate how you comply. Oh, well, I'm just doing what's on the drawings. That's all very fair and noble, but a builder must not blindly follow a drawing if the drawings don't comply with the requirements of the building regulations. They have an onus to comply with the building regulations. They must be undertaking their CPD annually and checking to see what regulations have changed, what has happened. So builders are very much responsible too. The assigned certifier is responsible for collating all the documentation and ensuring that everybody is doing their job right and complying and have the certification. Then we have ancillary certifiers, very, very important part in the process. You have ancillary certifiers, you have a builder or a block layer, and they should be going off and say, well, now I've my blocks done, they comply with SR 325 and my blocks are 7713, and there's my certificate, and they have done a very good job, and that's it, and there's my ancillary certificate. The radon barrier, who's the roofer, the tiler, the slater, the mechanical and electrical, they all should be providing their certification and have the qualification and the competence to stand over the works that they're doing, and that they know that I've done a good job, I am properly trained for the work that's been required of me to undertake, and there is my certificate, I have done it in compliance with the regulations. And whoever is finishing up the building then must make sure that everything comes together properly. So all these people are responsible. Nobody should be getting out of this. Compliance with the building regulations, you must demonstrate compliance. You must show how you're going to comply with the building regulations. We have very good guidance, and you have the code of practice for inspecting and certifying buildings and works. And I would actually say that it doesn't really matter whether you're building a one-off, whether using a professional designer or an assigned certifier, or going for the opt-out of statutory certification. Everybody that's building a house should actually read a copy of the code of practice for inspecting and certifying buildings and works and familiarise themselves. You're spending 3/4 of your income for 3/4 of your life on a dwelling, and you do need to do your research. The framework for building control authorities, which is under review at the moment, that gives the roles and responsibilities of the building control officers. For everybody, they can read that. It's on our website, and check to see what the building control officer should be doing. Compliance. You have the code of practice. You have a lovely set of technical guidance documents which are easy to read to show how you comply with parts A to M of the building regulations for non-complex buildings, prima facie compliance if you comply directly with those. And then you have standard recommendations. A lot of people forget about these standard recommendations. SR 325 is probably the most important national standard recommendation for the use of masonry structures in Ireland. How you construct using masonry. Masonry is concrete blocks, and we need to be all reading that. SR 16 mortar, your renders, your concrete, and SR 21 for your underfloor fill, and I'll talk a little bit more about all of those later. Acceptable construction details are very useful, a set of acceptable construction details on the department's website for Part L. You have agreement certificates, alternative national technical specifications, and performance in use. We have a lot of things that we have performance in use for a lot of products that we know work well if constructed well. We have never really tested them, but they work very well in use. So you have your CE marking for your products, your declaration of performance, and your essential characteristics are very important. Everybody needs to know that if they buy a construction product, they must get the paperwork, read the CE marking, read the declaration of performance, check if the essential characteristics on that declaration of performance are suitable for my intended use, are they fit for purpose. And that is very important for builders, designers, owners, assigned certifiers. And as I said, you have the acceptable construction details. They're all your very nice, easy to read documents for anybody building a house. Your code of practice, your commissioning, your installation commissioning of ventilation systems, your thermal bridging, lovely diagrams there. How you comply with Part A, Part B, K and M together, supplementary guidance on design of stairs, guide to marketing of aggregate concrete blocks. If you're using a block in your building, read that. There's only 14 pages in it. Excellent. Agrément certificate's very important, but just remember that when you see a BBA, that's not Ireland. So you need to see that every agreement certificate, I have a certificate, I have an agreement certificate, it certifies it's compliant with the building regulations. Check those building regulations are Irish building regulations. And then, as I said, you have the practice notes from the professions and ancillary certificates. There's all the ancillary certificates, and there's others that I'll talk a little bit more about those. Very important documents, very important part of compliance. When we're out inspecting, we get a lot of agreement certificates. Agreement certificates, very useful compliance tools. They're very useful for ancillary certification, but what do they mean? If you get an agreement certificate, a builder gets an agreement certificate, they must read the instructions. A lot of, and others will talk about it a little bit more, read the instructions on the agreement certificate. Where was that to be used? A Scandinavian house is built for Scandinavia, not the west of Ireland. So you need to look and see, is it suitable for very high driving range index areas? what does it have a requirement for a competent installer? If I get an insulated form of concrete house Agrément certificate, am I using the correct render on it that's specified in the Agrément cert, or do I go along and find a cheaper render and stick it on it? Then it's not compliant with its Agrément certificate. Are there particular things in the Agrément certificate that say this will require maintenance after 15 years, or this will require replacement? So the Agrément certificate, very, very important compliance tool, but it needs to be read by those that are using them and using the products that they refer to. And any deviation from an Agrément certificate then, it means it's not compliant with that Agrément certificate. Modular homes, we see a lot of those on our inspections these days. Excellent method for solving our housing crisis. We've been using modular homes for many, many years, and you'll see the little Avonry buildings that were built in Kilkenny dotted around the countryside that were they're built for 20 years. They're still here, could be 50 years later, providing very nice homes for people, built properly in the right locations. We have some prefabricated that we have had for years. We've had a timber frame for many, many years, very successful. The big thing is that they are part of our construction process, but we need to construct them properly in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. So what we're seeing on sites, what I'm pointing out is the gap between the off-site manufacturing in the factory. You get a lovely couple of lorries coming to your site with all your good quality pieces of your kit for your modular house, and then you have nobody on the site to actually supervise that interface between taking that off the lorry and putting it on your foundations. So that's the very important part of this. And then modular, they can comply with all the relevant requirements of the building regulations. A bit of innovative design, and we've seen many modular housing constructed very well for refugees, for Ukrainian, for people that, and quite quickly. So another useful type of design, but you need to watch, they need to be inspected. You need the right people that are competent to actually build them, and they need to be fit for purpose, and they need to be suitable for the location that they're putting them in. Again, make sure that your location is sheltered, read your certification, make sure your driving rain index is fit for purpose for the type of building that you're putting on your site. Everything must comply with Part D of the building regulations, that all materials and workmanship must be fit for the purpose for which they are intended for the lifetime of the building, and the lifetime of all dwellings is 50, 60 years, full stop, not in anything less. Again, these are other little inspection issues that we find. Every building, before it's opened, occupied or used, must have a BER, which must be on the register of the SEAI. But here's a BER that somebody picked up that came in for compliance. Watch out for the fails. It must pass everything on the BER. U values, the EPC, the CPC, they must pass. There's 4 fails on a BER certificate, but I have a BER, there's a certificate. But actually, no, sorry, you haven't, it's failed. The other challenge that we see on sites, metal web joists, used quite commonly, very good for construction, if constructed properly by the competent person. Make sure they're the right way up, make sure again you read the manufacturer's instructions. And these are all the little things that building control officers, when they're out on sites inspecting, will be looking for. Again, another thing we're looking for, as I said, remember the standard recommendations for the use of a product in Ireland. Every product must be CE marked. Certain products have a standard recommendation for the use of that product in this country because of our specific climatic conditions, because we are the island on the edge of Europe and we're beaten by the huge vast sea there between ourselves and America that's whipping in there all the time with winds and rain and everything. We're not sheltered. Most of Ireland is very highly exposed, and that's a reality. So we must have our standard recommendations for the uses of those products here in this country. The SR21, every building control officer on inspections will be saying, have you got your SR21 certification for your underfloor fill? And If you're building an ordinary size house, we'd need to see about 400 tons of that, not just one lorry load. So the thing of just buying one certificate to suit the building control officer, you're really fooling yourself. So builders need to be quite adamant that they collect the certification for all their products and have it there available when the building control officer comes on site. What we have is what some say is maybe a two-tier system for construction. We have our SI 9 of 2014, which requires that we have professionals involved in all aspects of the design, through to construction, through to inspection, through to certificates of compliance on completion for a building. And then we have SI 365, and this provides that certain buildings on single sites, dwellings or extensions can opt out of this statutory certification, meaning that the professionals that they employ do not have to be registered members of RAI, Engineers Ireland, or the Chartered Surveyors, but they still must be competent. So they're only intending a declaration to opt out of statutory certification. So when we go on site to one of these dwellings, we need to see the same certificates that we'd be looking for here by competent people. So everybody that's reading that should read that information note for owners of new dwellings and extensions who opt out of statutory certification. You're not opting out of the building regulations, you're opting out of only statutory certifications. And for those two types of construction, which are the same constructions but have different people overseeing them, they need to be fit for purpose, they must comply with the relevant requirements of the building regulations in such a manner as to avoid breaching any other requirement of the building regulations. So there is no get out clause here. They must submit, for the two of them, specifications and particulars as are necessary to outline how the proposed works or building will comply with the requirements of the second schedule of the building regulation. So when a building control officer checks the commencement notice, they must see the very same schedule of plans, specifications and particulars for the two of them. They must see the very same general arrangement drawings, so they must have a general arrangement drawing. They must have a schedule of plans, calculations, specifications as requested in question 6 of the commencement notice. And we'll be talking a bit more about this in our next CPD day in validating these commencement notices. They must all complete an online assessment via the building control management system of the proposed approach to compliance. So it doesn't matter whether I have the science certifier approach or the opt-out declaration approach, I must do all of these things. The only difference is the preliminary inspection plan and the certificate of compliance on completion by an assigned certifier. The online assessment, I must show how I'm demonstrating with Part 8M of the relevant requirements, so I must fill in all of these. So I'm an owner of a dwelling and I'm going to opt out of statutory certification, so I must be competent to do all of this myself. So that's what you're saying, really. I must give my general arrangement drawings. My general arrangement drawings, they can't be at this side, they must have all of those details, detailed out, the critical junction details, the roof details, the foundation details, all of that. That's what we need to be seeing for the one-off dwelling and the dwelling that has the assigned certifier. I need to see that you're complying with the masonry. You have SR21, you have 774 or 7713 if you're using concrete blocks. I need to see 13914 for the renders. So all of this must demonstrate compliance. So people need to think about what they're constructing. They're dwelling for their life and probably the life of the next generation or the next 2 generations. 3/4 of their income for 3/4 of their life, and they need to make sure that they comply with all of these. The dwelling with the opt-out must have all of these drawings and design. They must design the roof, the external walls, the windows, the door finishes, the wall finishes, the roof finishes. So we need to see a list of drawings coming in with the which at least has details of all of those. The building control officer can request a Section 11 request and ask for all of those details. And they must be included in the schedule of plans, calculations in particular. So really effectively, you're only opting out of having a professional, a registered professional. You're not opting out of anything else, and you must do all of the work yourself. I've just put something in our office that we like to. It is very important, and Dermot has said that we apply the resources of inspections to where they are needed most. All the reds there you see there is the severe exposure to wind-driven rain index in Ireland of all the counties, and they are overlapped on the where people are using the opt-outs. So in the most highly exposed areas in Ireland, we have people building dwellings using the declaration to opt out of statutory certification, where they probably need the professional most. So we need to think about that one. These are all our standard recommendations that we need in every building. SR16, the use of the EN 12620, that's aggregates for concrete. SR21, your aggregates for your underfloor fill must comply with that. So every person that is building a house must be able to show a building control officer, there's all my SR21 certification for my underfloor fill. There's how I've demonstrated compliance with my SR18, my plaster, my render, that's what they've used, that's the aggregates they use. There's the certification. And they've put 3 coats of render on the building because I'm in a very highly exposed area, and one of those coats is not this good coat. SR325, yep, I didn't get a professional designer, but I learned all about SR325 in school, and I've designed my masonry construction to that, and I have all my construction details in accordance, and my expansion joints and everything else, and all my blocks comply with EN 7713. So construction is a science and needs to be done by competent people. Everybody does need to read a guide to marketing use of aggregate concrete blocks. If you're building that building there, you'll need to read that. You'll need to ensure that all of your details, you have all those standard recommendation certification for that, and I've constructed in accordance with SR325. As I said, the submission of documents, very important. It's very important for a commencement notice with opt-out declaration. You need to have all of this, and there's all of the drawings that need to be submitted with it. And this is part of our inspection process, to check what documents you've submitted. We go out on site then and we look at the compliance with the building regulations. So all of these are a very important part of the process. We have an inspection program protocol for the 31 building control authorities, and that's to provide for a standardised approach of how we carry out building inspections across the country. That's just part of it, and it's on our website. We carry out risk-based inspections, and that's how we determine where's the riskiest parts, where we assign our people. The over-reliance on a risk-based inspection system can be a huge risk itself, so we carry out a certain amount of random, and then we have a certain amount of complaint-based inspections where we may have somebody complaining that the builder didn't do the work right, or maybe an assigned certifier is complaining their own site, or a designer that they're not designing to my design or whatever. And we'll take any queries to the office, and we will inspect them, because what we want is compliant buildings. We keep a record of inspections. Most building control officers have some form of mobile app that they record their inspections on. That's our one. We can use our phone, collate it. That's just the details that we can pull out for our risk-based inspection regime. Really what we're looking at is that inspections are the most important part of the building control process. Visibility on site. The building control inspector can be a great assistance to any building homeowner, designer, assigned certifier in providing guidance on how you should comply. They don't certify, but they have a great wealth of knowledge. people that are building their homes in Ireland should actually know who their building control officer is in each local authority and be able to call them up and say, look, do you want to come out and do an inspection, or can you give me some guidance on this, or ring our own office on it. We need competent people, we need meaningful inspections. We're very aware, and construction of all forms is very welcome, because we need to, we have a Housing for All is a huge building programme, and each form of construction is very welcome, but they can all comply with the building regulations. Some of them require more detailed inspection and innovation than others. Processes, product specification is very, very important. It's kind of depressing at times when you come at the same, you find the same faults and people are not watching them. So I have just taken out the compliance challenges, and they're the very same there, that the Part B, fire safety, detection, fire prevention systems, cavity barriers, etc. That list is in the defects in apartments list. It's been going around for a long time. We need to be getting rid of those and have them very, very rarely. Why? Cost the exchequer a fortune. The welfare and health and safety of the person in or about buildings is affected. It's not conducive to good circular economy or mitigation against the negative effects of climate change. We all pay for it eventually. We pay for it one way or another. Compliance culture is essential. We must start thinking why we need to comply. Safety, health, welfare of people, conservation of fuel and energy, access for all. So buildings, you're not just building for your own shelter. Somebody else is going to have to live in that building, and 2 or 3 generations. Every building built before 1975, seemingly, the European research has demonstrated it'll still be in use in 2050. So build once, build it right, comply with the building regulations, make sure you have competent people. If in doubt, ask your building control officer. We are here to be visible on site and assist. Thank you very much.